Justin Timberlake has just revealed to the world that he's been suffering from Lyme disease, which could explain some of his lackluster concert performances as of late. Now, I have to admit, I'm pretty meh on JT, and as much as I'd love to poke fun at him, Lyme disease is no joke. It is one of the most debilitating illnesses in the entire world, with a significant portion of patients experiencing persistent and sometimes severe symptoms, including chronic pain, fatigue, and cognitive dysfunction. Now, here's where the story turns dark. You see, for decades, the official story has been that Lyme disease was naturally occurring, originating from tick bites in the forests of New England. But what if Lyme isn't just a tick bite gone wrong, but rather the result of something far darker, far more sinister, that's been hidden from the public for decades? And I'm talking about government experiments, biological warfare, and a massive cover-up with wide-reaching implications for all of us.
Penelope Moore grew up in rural Vermont. Until recently, her life was filled with riding horses, playing tennis, and generally enjoying the outdoors. But in 2015, she got a diagnosis that changed everything. A blood test confirmed she had Lyme disease.
The first known cases of Lyme disease were reported in Lyme, Connecticut in the 1970s. But since then, the disease has exploded into a public health crisis, with the CDC estimating nearly 500,000 cases each year in the United States alone. Now, interestingly, Lyme, Connecticut just happens to be mere miles away from a US lab called Plum Island that was studying insects spreading bioweapons in the 1960s. Coincidence? Yes, according to the American Lyme Disease Foundation. They say, quote, "Some claim that Lyme disease was introduced into the northeastern region of the US by a man-made strain of Borrelia burgdorferi that escaped from a high-containment biological warfare laboratory on Plum Island. However, there is ample evidence to indicate that B. burgdorferi was present in the US well before the Plum Island facility was ever established." That's what the official experts are saying, and they wouldn't have any incentive to lie to us, would they? Maybe to the tune of millions of dollars a year, which I'll get back to in a second. But first, this is Willy Burgdorferi, a US government scientist who is credited as being the discoverer of Lyme. You see, before he passed away, he left a box of documents with this note on top that read, quote, "I wondered why somebody didn't do something. Then I realized I am that somebody." Very cryptic, so what could he be referring to? You see, during the Cold War era, Willy was one of 13,538 civilian employees of the US Chemical and Bioweapons Program. Chris Newby, a writer and scientific researcher, wrote in her book Bitten, quote, "The atomic bomb and the Cold War signaled a momentous change in the US biological weapons program. The vision of the scale of the intentionally spreading disease expanded to strategic attacks on par with the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and with the Soviet Union and its allies as potential targets."
We, meaning the US military, sprayed live bacteria from tugboats around the San Francisco Bay Area in the 50s. As far as ticks, I think the most outrageous tick experiments, uncontrolled on an unsuspecting public, were they did a pilot study in 1962 where they dropped infected ticks on Cuban sugarcane workers with the intent of destroying their number one cash crop so people would overthrow Fidel Castro, the communist leader.
Disturbing, to say the least. And in that box, Willy's box with that cryptic note on it, was evidence that the US government was indeed doing experiments like force-feeding ticks with disease agents. Quote, "The weapons designers were looking for a tick that wouldn't arouse the suspicion of an enemy country, filled with an agent for which the target enemy population wouldn't have natural immunity. And in these experiments, they would then release vials of hungry infected ticks on lab mice to test their newfangled diseases. Just horrible, horrible stuff. And Burgdorfer would carry these secrets for decades until shortly before his death, when Newby discovered a videotape in which he said, quote, he believed that the outbreak of tick-borne diseases that started around Lyme, Connecticut had been caused by a bioweapons release. So why is the origin of Lyme disease considered a conspiracy theory? The answer, I think, will shock you, but may not surprise you.
The important thing to know is that Lyme was the organism was announced in 82, and during that year was when the incentive structure for the CDC and the NIH and academic researchers changed. This Bayh-Dole Act was passed that said that if scientists in these organizations made a discovery and they patented them, then they could share in the profits if their discoveries were used in vaccines or test kits or treatments. The people in the 1990s ALDF website, the technical advisors, are pretty much the Lyme discoverers. They're all in their 70s, some late 70s, and they're there to protect their commercial interests. Some of them are involved in the new vaccine trial from Pfizer, and they're also protecting their legacy. They have built their whole careers on saying Lyme disease is easy to diagnose, easy to treat, easy to cure. But you know what? It's been over 50 years since it was first came on the scene. We still don't have a reliable test. We don't have a reliable treatment. About 20% of the people who get Lyme disease and co-infections or whatever go on to become chronically ill, and that's becoming a real burden on our society. We don't have very good prevention programs because CDC admits we have 500,000 people a year who are getting Lyme disease, and then who knows what other co-infections, and that has grown steadily since we first started tracking it in the early 80s. This is a huge problem that's being completely ignored, I think, because of money and because of the people involved in the initial discovery have been read into the whole bioweapon storyline, and they don't want to be discredited. Luckily, Willie came clean, and we know what we know now.
Wow, a story as American as apple pie. Corporate and financial incentives prioritize over the health and safety of Americans, and a government conspiracy to cover it all up to boot. My name is James Lee. This is the 5149 Show. Let me know what you think. I'm very curious to hear, have you or any of your family and friends have had experience with Lyme disease? And also, I think it's time for transparency. This kind of cover-up cannot be allowed to continue. It has to stop. And if you want to support my work exposing all these kinds of corruptions, please take a second to like this video, share it, subscribe. Thank you so much for your time. I'll see you in the next one.
The controversy in the Lyme disease research is a shameful affair. And I say that because the whole thing is politically tainted. Money goes to people that have, for the past 30 years, produced the same thing. Nothing.